This is just like a super cool technical challenge. The fact that you could even like do something like this. I think we'll check it out. I think we'll start here and then go from there. Oh, right. It's wrong account. Let me swap to my other one. There we go.
What you are seeing.
Here we go. So, how I built an open world engine for the N64. And considering we've been playing a PS1 game, you know, pretty relevant time-wise.
What you are seeing is being rendered in real time on N64 hardware. This game has a draw distance.
This game is killing the bitrate of the video.
On the scale of games like Skyrim. You can stand on one corner of the map and see all the way to the other side. To understand how I pulled this off, first you need to
that actually is
why
pretty
draw
sick.
distance is a problem in the first place on the N64. Draw distance is controlled by the developer. There's this thing called the projection matrix. You can set the near and the far clipping planes. A clipping plane just specifies where something is no longer visible. So if something goes past the far clipping plane, it disappears.
Sure.
And likewise, if it gets too close and goes in front of the near clipping plane, it also disappears. So why not just take the far clipping plane and push it out a few kilometers?
RAM.
Well,
CPU.
let's see what happens if we do that. Here's a simple scene. It's about 600 meters across, but I have the far clipping plane too close so you can't see most of it. So let's just go ahead and start pushing that outward. So you can see as I push the far clipping plane, more geometry becomes visible. So that's far clipping plane of about 1 kilometer. You may be looking at this thinking, well, what's the problem? Looks like things are still working. Well, that red cube off in the distance, that's supposed to be behind the blue and the green. Blue pops in, then the green, and then the red over the top. There's some Z fighting going on. I'll talk more about Z fighting later, but all you need to know right now is I can't reliably
PS1 isn't as powerful as the N64. Wait, did Nintendo actually have the most powerful console during that period?
draw things out in the distance. What shows up on top is actually determined by draw order at this point, and not by distance. You might be asking, why don't we just scale the player down, move the camera closer, and move that near clipping in to be closer too? That way, the world is bigger relative to the player, and we have a further draw distance. Let's try that. So I'll go ahead and start scaling down. So you can see the problem already. That yellow box is supposed to be behind, and it's already popping out. So again, you get some Z fight.
The N64 is the most powerful console, but its memory bus combined with the cartridge slot is what killed it. Ah, okay.
Is supposed to be behind, and it's already popping out. So again, you get some Z fighting issues. The issue here is the N64 has a 15-bit Z buffer, which means it can represent about 32,000 unique values. That might sound like a lot until you realize that the distribution of those values looks something like this. This is a graph that shows the distance from the camera on the X and the position in the depth buffer on the Y. So 0 is as close as you can get and 1 as far as you can get. And you can see it doesn't take very long for about 90% of this depth buffer to be used up. I think at a distance of 10 here, about 90% of the depth buffer is used to keep track of distances from 0 to 10. Anything beyond that, which is roughly beyond the player, you only get about 10% of the depth buffer, which is only about 3,200 values. So if I stretch out this far clipping plane to about 1,000, and then let's zoom the graph, that line looks almost horizontal. Like, it's hard to tell the difference between a distance of 800 and 900 or 1,000. The N64 struggles to see the difference too. That is where Z fighting comes in. When drawing those distant objects.
So how would you... I've not seen the video. How would you handle that? Would you convert far objects into like a skybox texture? And then as you get closer to them, then render them as objects? I guess that could work.
To the N64, they're the same distance. So which one gets drawn on top is determined by draw order and not actual distance. The best way to reduce Z fighting is to take the near plane and push it out. That reduces the amount of Z fighting, but now there's a new problem. things that are close to the camera get clipped that shouldn't be. The trick is you need to be able to push the near plane as far out as makes sense while still keeping things visible that you want visible. When balancing draw distance like this, you can either push the far plane out or you can bring the near plane in, but you can't do both or you're going to get issues. The solution is I just draw the world twice. First, I draw everything that's far away, scaled down by about 100, and then I do a separate pass where I draw everything that's close. So that gives me best of both worlds. I can draw large objects at a small scale where details don't matter, and then when I'm drawing things close, I'm able to retain that near clipping plane and
wait, that's actually kind of interesting.
Render things more detailed. Clearly, the distant object pass is less detailed than the near one. That is for two reasons. One, there's not enough memory to store the entire map at full detail. And two, it would also just be ridiculously slow to render it at full detail. Actually, to speed things up when rendering low detail, there's actually two different levels of detail. A single lowest detail tile can actually replace 4 of the mid detail tiles. Rendering the tiles actually works like this. So first of all, the skybox is drawn. After that, you draw each of the lowest detail tiles, but first it's checked to see if it's even visible. If it's not visible, it's just entirely skipped. If it is visible, it's then checked to see how close it is. If the low detail tiles are too close, they're skipped and instead replaced with higher detail versions of themselves. And for each of those high detail tiles, the same process is done. Check to see if it's visible, etc. And in the end, you get a layering of all of these tiles from back to front.
Well, yeah, entity culling, but also... why not just subsample the high details? That is a good question. I don't know.
Showing the low detail version of the scene. And then once you layer the high detail stuff on top of it, you get a complete world. One important thing to know, the high detail stuff on top of it,
and the nice thing about LOD on lower resolution systems, this is a problem, like this is the thing you can do on lower resolution systems like this that you can't really do on modern systems as easily. A lot of that low detail model is hidden by the low resolution, right? So you can get away with like really bad models that pop in because you're running at such a low resolution. It's really hard to see that pop in. When that's done on, like you see the same thing done in modern games, have really bad pop in, or like either really bad pop in or really bad handling of the LOD. And you can clearly see where you go between the render borders. But here you can get away with that.
You get a complete world. One important thing to note, when drawing the low detail tiles, I actually disabled the Z buffer, which is why they are rendered from back to front. So you can see as these tiles pop in, it's always the distant ones that get drawn first. And that's intentional. Because without the Z buffer, you need to manually...
So you're basically re-implementing the idea of a Z buffer. Rather than doing it with an actual Z buffer, you're handling it with render order. So you just render the things further away first. Which technically is a worse idea, but if you have this Z buffer limitation, you don't really have a choice in that regard.
Manage the order in which things are drawn, so that way things layer correctly. And disabling the Z buffer is actually an important optimization for two reasons. One, the N64 is very memory bound, and drawing with the Z buffer on incurs another memory read and a memory write, which is not ideal. And the other reason is I don't want to have to clear the Z buffer twice, once for the low detail and once for the high detail. That way I can just clear it once for high detail, and the high detail gets the full access to the Z buffer. Making the map was no small feat. Fortunately, I had Pyrazine on the team, and well, here's how he went about making the map. The distant terrain is drawn without a Z buffer, meaning we can no longer draw triangles in any order we want, meaning we can't group them together by material. So texturing the normal way is out of the question. because we'd be swapping materials hundreds of times or maybe thousands of times every frame. At first, we considered just having a single material for the entire distant terrain. I was thinking only vertex colors might look okay, but I wasn't happy with it. So I wanted to try baking the high detailed terrain, including all the different materials into one texture. Baking, in 3D modeling terms, basically means taking a picture of a fully rendered high detail object or surface and applying it to a lower detail model, giving it the illusion of high detail from afar. But obviously baking the entire terrain into a single 4 kilobyte texture wasn't great, even though it was already an improvement over just vertex colors in some ways. Then James came up with the idea of dividing the terrain into chunks that could be rendered back to front individually and relative to each other. So each smaller area could have its own baked texture without redundant material swapping. Now, the far-off terrain actually looked like a reasonable representation of the close-up geometry. It still didn't run great. No wonder, since I ended up with about 100 chunks, individually UV mapped and textured. So a second level of detail was needed. 4 chunks combined into one with even lower detail. Now we had a good and even sometimes great frame rate. Now we're making everything, geometric detail, texture detail, and vertex lighting included, into a single...
I love trying to write things for old hardware. This is the kind of optimization that no one would even think about today. Oh, well, you know, you've got 32 gigabytes of RAM and a fucking, I don't know, even if it's just like an older G, you got like a 3060, right? This is the kind of bullshit you don't have to pull on any sort of semi-modern system.
Texture. The distant terrain.
But if you were to do this kind of bullshit, you would have a game that runs flawlessly on basically anything.
Had no more use for vertex colors. This actually worked out great because this meant I could use them for something cool. You will notice that the color of the world fades in the distance. This, of course, is not to hide the low draw distance, since ours, in theory, is infinite. It's to create an atmospheric perspective, but not in the way you normally see with fog in N64 games. Usually, distance fog is handled by the N64's Blender unit, not to be confused with the 3D modeling app. Which is normally intended for that, and transparency among other things. The issue in our case is that it can only do plain color interpolation, as far as is practical for us here anyway. This works great when you want actual fog, but if you want something resembling atmospheric color change, like you'd see in the real world on a bright day, it's not the best. So what I did was ditch the Blender unit altogether and use the color combiner. This is the part of the N64 that usually handles texture effects, like, for example, combining textures with vertex lighting. This allows for 2 new things we can do with distance fog. The first is that instead of straight color interpolation by distance, we can now interpolate by 3-channel RGB, which lets us layer the fog color over the texture color in a way that looks similar to a screen effect, and much more similar to real daytime atmospheric fading. The second thing is that since we're not using the vertex color for anything else, we can actually have locally colored fog. In this case, it is used for a top to bottom gradient. There's much more I could talk about, such as things I'd like to improve for future projects, but I'm pretty happy with what we managed with the deadline. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about some of the gameplay problems that you experience with a map this big. For comparison, here are some maps from other games next to ours. This massive map is really cool. And here are some maps from other games.
Oh my, wait, okay, wait, it actually is the side, fuck.
Games next to ours. This massive map is really cool, but it actually makes the game worse if there's nothing to do in it.
Sure.
And traversal is really slow. Since I didn't have time to fill up...
Elder Scrolls Arena has a large map. Yes, the old Elder Scrolls games do have giant fucking maps. People talk about it being, like, crazy impressive, and you actually, like, play the game, and you don't use the map, because it's just, like, 30 kilometers of trees.
The game with lots of content, I simply made the hover cycle really fast. I mean, like, fast. When fully upgraded and while boosting, you can reach speeds of around 180 miles per hour. I also made the map an important gameplay element. The map starts out hidden, and as you explore the map, you reveal it little by little. This makes exploration take more effort and gives some more meaning to exploring any part of the map. I also simply didn't just put quest markers on the map that you blindly follow, but instead I gave you less detailed maps that you need to compare to what the map you're revealing is to figure out where you're going. So you have to put more effort into completing objectives, which is good because there are fewer objectives to complete than a game that typically has a map this size. And I think the results speak for themselves.
If a game built like this had come out on the N64, even if it was just like a big empty world, right? It would be remembered as this crazy technical achievement.
If you want to try the game out, you can download it here for free. Just know that you'll need to run it on real hardware or a highly accurate emulator like Gary's. And, well, if you want a physical cartridge, I'm going to be giving away a few of them for free.
Oh, that's cool.
Joe, add the label in post. And just leave a comment on this video, and I'll pick a few comments to get a free cartridge. I also wanted to give credit to everybody on the team for this project. It would not have happened without their help. I'll leave some links in the description if you wanted to check out more of their stuff. I also wanted to give credit to Helda Dodongo, the maker of Tiny 3D. You should go check out his channel. He recently released an N64 game engine that feels kind of like Unity. You can go try. With this Game Jam project, I wanted to prove it was feasible to have such a large overworld and far draw distance. I plan on using everything that I learned and the engine improvements in my long-term game project. It will be a full game that will run on original N64, analog 3D, and mod retro. If you want to see this game complete, please like this video, subscribe, or even consider joining as a Patreon. All the help is greatly appreciated because I really want to make this another great game to add to N64's library. Until next time.
Do I know Kokoro Connect? Yes, yes I do.
There's only 3 weeks
What
left
scene are
in
you
the
gonna
game,
reference?
And I committed to way too much. I tried to make this giant overworld, and I wanted there to be a story and characters.
This scene?
And now I am really scrambling to get this thing done. But
oh, the joke that killed an anime.
I'm hopeful it'll be cool,
That's interesting.
even if it's incomplete. I just wanted to show this one funny bug. That's my brother Samson over there.
We can check it out.
He's supposed to be injured, so I talked to him. It hurts.
It hurts.
Oh, there he goes.
He died.
Injured. That should be fixed before the end of the game, I hope. And the writing will be better. I hope. That's all.
I'll have a look at that. I'll have to check that one.